small, ugly, and tough as nails. I bought this Tercel quite a few years ago as a commuter to go to and from work. Drove it for about a year. Blew up something in the top end, something in the valve train. At the time, I wasn't one for tearing apart engines, so it was much easier for me to buy a parts car and put the engine and transmission into this. I did quite a few modifications. Used lots of the interior, got myself some folded seats, did all sorts of part swaps like that. Most importantly though, I swapped over the engine and transmission. Then I had a 5-speed instead of a 4, and still sitting around that 90 horsepower mark probably. Maybe a little bit more, because the donor engine that went in here was made to be running power steering and some AC accessories. I deleted all that, right? So I've just got the engine not working hard. We'll see if it'll start up. I'll pull it off these ramps. I'm going to head out back so I can do some reconnaissance on the other transmission that I had pulled out before. I might need to put it back in now. Somewhere back here. There we go. Toyota drivetrain. Everything here. New motor mounts. Good thing she's not frozen to the ground. And we got a 4-speed transmission here. It's really quite small, in fact. So, do we pull the tranny off out here, or just get that whole mess back home and into the garage? That would be our plugs, full of ice. I don't know how much water's in there. So after some heavy abuse over the years, the Tercel has definitely gotten worn out. All right, we've definitely put premature wear on everything. We've swapped parts a few years ago. Long story short, I've got old 1997 spindles, lower ball joints, calipers, and old worn out shocks, bearing hub, and rotor. They've been in my parts pile for a while, and everything has become one. So I started to tear them apart because the plan was to have a nice clean spindle. I'll clean it up, paint it even so it doesn't get all corroded in the future. I'll get my bearing pressed in, put a new lower ball joint on. They're cheap and easy. And then probably do the same thing. I could clean up the brakes a bit if I wanted, or I could just use the ones that are on there. Either way, the plan was to rebuild the spindle with the new hub and bearing, so that when I do the transmission swap and I have these things apart, I can just put nice, new, clean parts back together. Because isn't that great? Right, everything has been seized. I've been using torch. Anyways, things aren't coming apart as easily as they should. But that's okay. It's just metal. Next step is I'm just going to take the grinder and I'm going to chop off the bolt so I can get the rest of this caliper bracket off. And then once the caliper bracket is off, I'll be able to pull the rotor and the hub and the bearing and everything out, and then begin on the other one. So, although this is 1997 equipment, OEM equipment from Toyota, this is no different than any other restoration that you or I might be doing. You're going to fight with every bolt. Every surface is going to be covered in corrosion, and really, you're likely going to want to clean it up and coat it with the proper coatings for whatever conditions those parts are going to be in. Some of these conditions are going to be high heat area, right by the brakes. So we got to use proper materials and proper prep techniques if we want our coatings to stick. Anyways, that's it for the introduction of at least this bearings task and ripping apart this front end. I'll keep getting some videos in here, try to get the whole task documented. Alright, so we're in the midst of tearing apart these Tercel front spindles. I haven't even touched this one, but I have pulled apart caliper, rotor, bearing from this spindle. I have been fighting with it because part of that bearing is still stuck in there, and it just does not want to play nice. Anyways, I'll continue on that. In the meantime, I did manage to get out back with the car so that I could pick up the other engine and transmission. Out back in the field in the cold, I tried to separate the two, and I was having no luck, so I just wrestled the whole thing in. Now I can see I'm starting to get some separation of the cases. But otherwise, we have a complete engine and transmission here, right? Manifold, full harness. So we should have plenty of good parts. I'll tear in and see, what the real issue was when I bailed on it a few years ago. And we'll prep up these parts, or at least begin working on them, so that when this engine is done, this one will be ready to go. In the meantime, I just need the transmission and clutch, and we'll get the suspension stuff sorted out. We did it. We got the 5E FE and the 4-speed that it's mated to into the garage. So one of the first things we'll want to do is see if we can get this transmission off of it, since that's the part that we'll be needing immediately. But I will be carefully removing the harness and inspecting things, boxing them up so that I've got all these extra parts properly preserved, much better than I have for the last year or so.